Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to 22 Panels. My guest tonight is probably one of the comic creators that we've talked about the work of the most without talking to him or talking about him as much as anybody else. Paul Karasik. We've literally we had a Nancy roundtable where How to Read Nancy came up quite a bit between a number of cartoonists who love Nancy. Um, we covered the ride together in what we call Brit's Cabinet, which I do with Britt Payne, who's a entertainment lawyer but has a autistic son, so he's made bringing autism into the entertainment world like his passion, and we do a semi-regular. He's busy, so we don't do it monthly. We do it when he's got time. um, Discussion of comics with kind of an autism perspective. And long ago, we have a monthly show that we call the Pulp Blotter, where we kind of do pulp-ish comics. And we picked City of Glass for that probably 2 years ago. And when I realized, oh my God, I keep talking about this guy, Paul Karasik, and the New York Trilogy is coming out, I should really reach out to him and say, "Hey, come talk to me." So I did, and and then we put it off for a while because the book hadn't actually come out, and then I forgot, and then Matt Madden talked about you, and I went, "Ah, I need to write back to Paul," and now here you are. So Paul, that's my rambling introduction. How's it going?
Everything's fine. Thank you very much. I'm glad we're finally getting around to this.
I am too. Like I said, I mean, it's weird to me that these three incredible works are all from the same person, but I've enjoyed them all immensely. City of Glass multiple times through the years, and I was so happy to see the entire trilogy get done. So that's where I want to start. That's the new book. Talk to me about, I mean, City of Glass was done with David Mazzucchelli, what, almost 20 years ago?
More like 30 years ago.
Okay.
It came out in
So,
1994.
yeah, so I mean, was it always an intention to do all three, or did it fall by the wayside? I mean, it's not often that you see a trilogy where one book comes out in one century and then the rest of it gets put together the next century. Um,
It's a multi-century project.
right.
Well, it's an interesting story, and I guess that we could start telling that story by making it clear to your listeners that we are worked on this project, the New York Trilogy. It's a trilogy of three short prose novels by the novelist Paul Auster, who died almost exactly a year ago.
Yep.
And he wrote them as his first fiction novels in the early 80s. And we adapted the first one, City of Glass, in 1994. And then the other two short novels were just recently adapted. And they appear now from Pantheon in a single volume with all three books together. And I did all of the scripting and visual breakdown for all three of the books. David, of course, did the first one. And the New Yorker cover artist and amazing illustrator Lorenzo Mattotti did the illustrations for the second one. And I sketched out and did the final drawing for the third book.
Okay.
So
And
that's sort of
City
like
of Glass is the first one,
City of Glass, the
Ghosts
first
is
one,
the
the second,
second one,
and the
and
Locked
Locked
Room
Room is the third.
one. Yeah.
So
So,
that kind of answers
well, that
like
sort of
my
doesn't answer the
yeah.
question why it took so
No,
long,
that's true.
but it does get your viewers situated as to what
Listeners,
we're taught.
we
Listeners.
don't need them to see my ugly face.
Okay, good. Listeners understand. Even though we're zooming, they will be listening.
Yes.
Understand. Okay.
Yes.
Uh, so the way that City of Glass came about, I guess the first thing that you need to understand is that the work of Paul Auster is his fiction is marked by a certain degree of uh, literary curiosity. He's always curious about the human condition, but the way that he goes about examining it, he putting his characters through some other odd contortions. His books are rife with coincidence and circumstance and cross paths. And I felt as soon as I came in contact with Auster that I didn't realize it at the time, but I kind of became a character in one of his novels. I met Auster in the just after the New York Trilogy had come out, and he was not yet a famous author. I was teaching at a prep school in Brooklyn Heights, and his son Daniel was in my fifth grade art class.
Oh, wow.
Uh, and I had heard that Auster was some kind of author, uh, and that he had written these New York trilogy. And so I read the books, thinking that when he came in for a parent conference, I'd be able to kind of schmooze him up a little bit and chat him up and get friendly with him and show off how literary I was. And so I read the books, and I found City of Glass particularly interesting in terms of the potentials for comics making. And, I always have a sketchbook nearby, and I made some sketches in my sketchbook based on an opening sequence in City of Glass. Uh, However, when Auster came in for the parent-teacher conference, we didn't talk about the books at all. And we certainly didn't talk about my little pathetic sketches because we were so charmed by his son, Daniel. I don't even think we mentioned the fact that he was an author and I was a cartoonist. It just didn't come up. But
Right.
a couple of very nice parent-teacher conferences. I liked him a lot. He was a very smart, funny guy to hang out with. And then that was that. So then we flash forward about 7 years or so, and I've moved out of New York City. I'm living in the country, and the phone rings, and it's Art Spiegelman. And I had worked with Art in New York City at the same time when I was teaching as the associate editor of Raw Magazine,
Okay.
which is, for those listeners who are not familiar with that, a seminal comics and graphics review. And Art Spiegelman, of course, is the Pulitzer Prize winning author of Mouse, A Survivor's Tale.
Yeah. Bob Sikoriak is part of the comic strip group we have.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so
So
he's a
Bob,
regular on
yep,
22 Panels.
yep, good. Yeah, so
One of
Bob
my early,
sort of
early, early, early guests.
when I left, Bob sort
So,
of took my job because Bob was in one of my students at the School of Visual Arts. So it's all interconnected.
yep.
And so Spiegelman
I
calls
got
and,
to meet Art at CXC this year.
Good.
Very
So
nice man.
Spiegelman called and he said, well, it's not uncommon for him to call and for us to just kind of chat. And but I was surprised to hear from him at that point. And he said, well, I'm helping a publisher in New York City adapt a series of contemporary noir-ish fiction into graphic novels. And we chose one we knew it was going to be really hard to do, and that's why we chose it first. And we've had a couple of artists take cracks at it, and no one seems to be able to kind of figure out the code to be able to translate it because it's not a straightforward noir fiction. It's kind of postmodern, it's kind of odd. And I said, well, okay, well, what's the book? And he said, City of Glass by Paul Auster. And I said, oh, well, I've already started and it's down in the basement. So I went down the basement, got my sketchbook out and dusted it off. They had already enlisted David Mazzucchelli to be the artist, which was a very fortunate thing for City of Glass, the graphic novel, because David was coming off of, among other things, drawing Daredevil for Marvel Comics for a number of
Yep.
years, as well as drawing the definitive Batman story, Batman Year One, really the only
Yep.
Batman that you need to read. And so he could really draw the hell out of New York City, which is very important for City of Glass because New York
Oh,
City
yes.
is part of it's one of the major characters of the book.
It's almost the main character.
So it sort of is. And so that's how it all came about in this odd, very Austerian series of coincidences and crossed paths. Um, so that's how that first book came out. Now, to finally get around to answering your question, what took so long to do the other two decades later? Uh, it's really because I couldn't figure out what they were really about. City of Glass is very clear that it's about the nature of fiction. The characters talk about uh, fiction. One of the main character, Quinn, is a mystery writer, and he absorbs a fictional persona that gets the whole plot rolling. And after a
Right.
while, he loses his own identity to this fictional persona. And then, since that fictional persona is fictional, all of his identity just gets obliterated. But the central idea behind City of Glass is if this is if this brush that I'm holding in my hand, if we don't call it a brush, is it still a brush? So, it was very clear what City of Glass was to me, but the other two books were much more elusive. They're not so much a trilogy. Auster called them a triptych. And I think that's
I
a
like
better
that.
way of thinking about them because a trilogy often
I
has
also, that's one of
same
my favorite words.
characters and same plot lines and a big story arc. But in this case, the three different books have three different characters, three different protagonists, all of whom live in New York City and are unfortunate lonely men who make one or two very bad decisions and everything goes kind of south. But once I understood what the other two books were about decades later, and I talked to Auster and I said, I think that this is what is really going on here. And he was like, okay, you want to give him a try? And I was like, yeah, let's go. So that's how that's how it came about.
That's how it just kept percolating in the back of your head for
Hmm. Yeah,
decades. I love that.
yeah,
I
just
love
what
that.
wanted to. Yeah, I
And
travel around with these paperbacks with me. I had the two old paperbacks that I bought back in the early days. And if I go someplace to Europe teaching or something like that, I just carry one or two of them along with me. I must have read both of those books over a dozen times easily over the past 20 years.
I just had Damien Duffy on who has been adapting Octavia Butler with
Mm.
John Jennings, and he talked
Oh yeah.
about how he had to read the Earthseed books like 20 times a piece to
Mm.
really.
Mm.
And he's like, which I don't recommend to other people because it was a harrowing experience. But when you're adapting,
Uh-huh. Well, is he adapting the Earthsea trilogy?
or not the Earth, or the is it the Earthseed?
Uh, that's
Which is the
that's
duology?
that's Ursula Gwynn.
No, no, not Earthsea.
Oh, because those are
Seed.
really great.
Yeah, no, they're actually the first one has been adapted. I know I've got an advanced reader that I haven't, so it's coming out soon too.
Oh,
Um,
she did the Earth Seed. Isn't that
right.
right? Okay, I misheard you. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the first one came out, and did John?
Parable of the Sower,
Yeah,
Parable of the Talents.
yeah, yeah,
They're
yeah.
both out now. Talents came out, I think, a week and a half ago.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Oh,
Yeah,
I'll look forward to that.
yeah. It's fantastic.
Mm.
I wouldn't have wanted to have to read the book 20 times.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean that leads to a decent question that I know wasn't actually on my list, but I like it. Talk to me about how you, I mean, particularly with Auster, who uh, is a little abstract. How do you adapt? How do you visualize? I mean, you talked about needing to find the meaning, but once you found the meaning, how do you? I mean, I
Well,
remember, and I didn't find my physical copy of it in time, but I brought it up this morning. Like in his introduction, Art Spiegelman wrote about how Mazzucchelli was having a lot of trouble figuring out how to get rolling, but that you had unlocked that. Do you remember what it was that you'd unlocked?
Well, I do specifically. It's the problem with the second chapter of Auster's book, which is a monologue uh, delivered over a course of 20 something pages by a young man who's been abused as a child and locked in a closet and has lost some facility with speaking the English language. And he does a monologue. It's just a soliloquy, and it goes on and on and on and on. And it's rather difficult at first to understand what he's saying. Although the words are clear, the meaning is elusive. And eventually, one constructs the understanding of the monologue, uh, but it takes some time. And once you sort of figure out what has really happened to this poor kid, the pieces click together, and you sort of learn to uh, um, understand his mode of talking. And so, how do you adapt that into a visual language? It's just talking. And so, the solution that I came up with there was to um, I leaned heavily on the work of Harvey Kurtzman. In
Hmm.
fact, Harvey,
You see that?
yeah, I mean, there would be no City of Glass, there would be no New York Trilogy without the work of Harvey Kurtzman, uh, who I was fortunate to study with at the School of Visual Arts, but really I learned from studying his work intensely. So we had to come up with a visual sort of metaphor for the experience of the reader understand this gobbledygook language by this kid. And, I don't want to spoil it to anyone who hasn't read the book, but, I found a way of making it visually compelling and delivering what's really going on uh, uh, when you're listening to this young man bare his soul. You're actually going down into his soul.
Yeah, I'm
So
flipping
it's
through
a
the
trip.
pages right now
It's a
because
trip inside of him.
they're
Uh,
definitely one of my favorite segments. I mean, he uses nine panel grids in one of the more. I mean, I love the nine panel grid to begin with, but like uh, the way it fades in and out of almost different realities, all while the monologue is going, is one of my favorite parts of the book. So it's very cool that that was what.
yeah, there's a bunch of things going on with there too. There's
Right.
uh, it's hard to discuss without being able to point to the pictures, but if you study that sequence carefully, you there, there are several very intentional layers of an onion you can pull apart. Um, and, I don't want to spoil it
Which
for anyone.
no, I feel like there's another day that yeah, this is one of those comics that I know. I mean, I come back to it on my own, so I'm certain I'll come back to it on 22 panels as well. It's I actually it
Well, I would
was
recommend if you really want to, if that's what your listeners like is as sort of an in-depth discussion and analysis, you could just talk about that one
yeah,
chapter. And I
yeah.
guarantee you, if you slow down your reading and really study what it is we're doing behind the surface of the page, you will be rewarded.
I have no idea what my listeners like. Hi, Mom. Hi, Britt. Hi, Adam. Hi, John. That might be all of them.
Okay.
It's not, but it's my joke that it is.
Okay.
But I tend to do what I like, so I like that
Yeah.
idea.
Mhm.
And what I haven't done with this yet is actually kind of compare it to the original text. I've read the original text, but I haven't like sat with them together, and I like to do that sometimes.
Well,
Um,
so you asked how do you go about adapting, and so that kind of your comment there leads me to the simple fact that um, I knew how many pages the original Auster's original novel was given, say, City of Glass, and then I knew how many pages we were given to work with, which were
Yeah.
significantly fewer. And
Right.
so I built it's about the extent of my sixth grade or seventh grade math, a ratio. And it turned out to be one for every page that I had of the comic, I had to deliver 1.7 pages of the text. And so you see, in doing that, it gave me a very useful restriction, uh,
Hmm.
which is something that you mentioned Matt Madden before.
That Matt Madden and his constraints, he adores
Exactly.
them.
So this was a very useful example of that. So
Right.
you can imagine, like the original text has the plot story arc has certain peaks and valleys over the course of the novel, and then imagine the similar mountain range of peaks and valleys for the graphic novel is exactly the same, but it's compressed.
Right.
So people who have read the original prose novel of City of Glass are often quite and like it are often like they often like the graphic novel version because it's pretty much exactly the same story
Hmm.
with the same peaks and valleys. A little trimming
Right.
here and there just for consistency's sake. Of course, we don't have so many words in it because the pictures do a lot of the heavy lifting.
Right. And I mean, I I truly believe that comics are the most flexible medium, and part of that is because um there are comics that I can't imagine being well adapted to other mediums, but there's almost
Mm.
nothing I've ever read in another medium that I don't think could be adapted into a good comic. It's not
That
necessarily going to
said,
be the same as the other medium, but
right. That said, however, most comics adaptations are terrible. Um,
I think we've been doing some good ones lately.
Good for you because there are some.
Yeah, I
There are
mean, I
definitely
mean,
definitely are some.
if we're talking like the old
Yeah, classics,
um
Comics Illustrated or
classics
something like that.
illustrated, yeah,
Yeah.
most of them were let's dumb it
Horrible.
down for the kids, but like
Yep. Well, let's just get the job done and get
right, but
moving.
like I mean, we talked briefly about the Octavia Butler ones that have been done lately, and all three of those are fantastic.
Hmm.
I felt like Ryan North and Albert Montez opened up Slaughterhouse-Five to me in a way that it had never been opened in like five or six reads of the novel. And I loved that novel,
Great.
but it
That's
became
great. Good for
funny to
you.
me when I read the comic.
Hmm. It is grimly funny. It's amazing how
And
he
and
pulls
I
that off.
knew that it was kind of funny, but like it became really funny to me when I
Mm.
could see it.
Mm. Good.
Um, for that matter, I can't read Spanish and I adore um Victor Santos'
Mm.
adaptation of Fahrenheit 451.
Mm.
I
Good.
mean, thankfully,
Good.
I know the original well enough that I don't need to be able to read Spanish.
They
But
exist. Yeah.
yeah,
Good comics adaptations exist.
yeah. So yeah, and again, I think as comics as a medium are being embraced more by universities and libraries, certainly, and starting to be embraced more in earlier education.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. There's definitely more out there, and so as a result of there being more out there, there are more successful ones. There's also a
right.
higher percentage of crappy ones too. There's one that I like to cite, which is one of my favorites, which is John Porcellino's adaptation of Thoreau's Walden. I think
Oh, I
that
haven't read that one. I love Porcelino.
Yeah, that's really kind of a neglected masterpiece. So I try to mention that every time somebody talk and wants to know an example of an adaptation that I think is worth it.
Yeah. Oh, of course, Center for Cartoon Graphics.
Mhm. That's hard to beat.
They do fantastic work at the Center
Hmm.
for Cartoon Studies.
Yes, they do.
Okay. Well, now I have another book to put on my list.
Hmm.
But it also means you
John,
can't use it later when I ask you for the book that everybody needs to read.
hmm, hmm.
Um, I know that you mostly talk about this when your co-author is available, but tell me a little bit about How to Read Nancy, just because it's such a
Yeah, I'll give you the sort of what the basic
Yeah.
idea behind how to read Nancy is. And then if you decide you want to talk about it in depth, you should have both Mark and myself on.
Yes.
But we like to talk about it together. That said, we talk about it individually when we're teaching because
All
it's
right.
very useful if any of your listeners are teaching classes on comics. Often cited as Scott McCloud's book or Linda Barry's book, both very fine books on comics and comics language. But I know I found in the comics classroom, I teach all year round and I taught all around the world. And I always use Ernie Bushmiller as an example of effective comics making. So the idea behind our book, How to Read Nancy, is that everything that you need to know, let's say 85%, 85% of what you need to know about how comics work and function and how to construct comics is hidden in a single Nancy comic strip from August 8th, 1959 by the cartoonist Ernie Bushmiller.
Yeah.
Uh, and Nancy was a comic strip that had been around for decades when I was a kid growing up and reading the newspaper. And when I was a kid, we all read comics in the newspaper. We talked about them all
Right.
the time in the playground. Newspapers existed and comics in newspapers were in
Yep.
the end of their golden era in the
Right.
1960s when I was older. But none of us would ever talk about reading Nancy because it was so stupid. Really stupid. Every day, a different joke, puns and nonsense, and little kids behaving kind of like little kids. But and the central character, the titular character, is this character Nancy, who is a very clever individual, problem solver, and all around kind of real little girl. She hates school and she loves cookies.
Yep.
And this particular example that we use, we deconstruct every aspect of comics language, the character design, layout, composition, panel size, balloon shape, balloon location, spotting the blacks, silhouetting, story arc, story structure. Everything is in these three panel comic strip that appeared, one morning on August 8th,
Right.
1959. So it grew out of a class Mark and I taught together. After Art Spiegelman left the School of Visual Arts, he handed the class over to us to teach two of his obnoxious little precocious students. And we talked about Nancy, and there was sort of a cult of Nancy, people who had grown up thinking Nancy was stupid, and then sobered up as adults and realized, oh, okay, it's really brilliant. Uh,
Yep.
and that's sort
My
of a
my
New
my
York
my
centric
my
group of
my friend Dennis Kitchen is very much in that cult.
yeah. Nick Kitchen is one of the instigators behind
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
cult, the cult of Nancy and the secret
Yeah.
Ernie Miller Society. Although he will be
Yeah.
the last one to admit it. It's a secret Ernie Bushmiller Society so secret nobody knows if anyone else is a member. Anyhow, so that's it's the long story short. Um, it's a strip that we've been talking about for years, and when we started, we had written a very brief essay about this particular comic strip for a collection of best of Ernie Bushmiller's Nancy, edited by Brian Walker back in the day. And over the years, what had happened, Tad, is that people had photocopied that essay and were using it in the classroom. And we thought, well, wait a second, we should just write the book, and then they'll have to buy the book and use that in the classroom. And we thought, we thought it would only take us a couple of years.
Capitalism at its best.
Absolutely. Um, and make a dime off of it. But we spent so much time on that book
So
that
you're one of those
I'll lose
professors that
lose
writes the
money on
book
it
and
the
then
rest of my
makes
life.
your students buy your book. I see how
Yeah,
it is.
basically. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep. Right.
It's the best grift in the game, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Except that, I could have students. I could have entire colleges, universities buy my book every semester, and I'll still never make back the investment of time and sweat and tears and blood that I put into that book. Mark and I worked on that book every single day of our lives for over 10 years. And it's by far the most extensively difficult and challenging project I've ever worked on. And so,
I mean, it's amazing. I
yeah,
now definitely having heard that, I definitely need to bring you guys back sometime
yeah, sure.
together
Yeah,
because
yeah,
hearing all about how it got put together sounds like it would be fun.
sure, sure.
Um, uh, the work of yours that is perhaps nearest and dearest to my heart, if only because I am both autistic myself and have many, many autistic students, is the Ride Together.
Hmm.
Um, Talk to me about deciding to write that book.
Well,
It's
so
very
so
personal.
yeah, so The Ride Together is this memoir about growing up with our eldest brother David, who had autism. He died not too long ago, and after leading a very rich life. And it started out with my sister, whom I collaborated on the book with. My sister Judy, who has always been my staunchest advocate and best playmate. She's really an extraordinary person who really taught me the pleasures of creative play when I was very young. She had started writing about just short stories that she remembered about growing up in our family as a way of preserving our family history to share with her son, who was an infant at the time, and she would just want to make sure that he understood, you know, what our family was. And I looked over her shoulder and I read some of her stories, and I was, I was motivated, let's say, to start creating some of my own. And so I drew some stories and shared them with her, and she wrote some stories and shared them with me. Ultimately, what happened was that we figured out that if we put these two modes of communication, comics and prose together, and these two creators together, we could have kind of an interesting resonance within a family story told alternating chapters of prose written by Judy with chapters of comics written and drawn by myself, and shifting back and forth as the whole story moves chronologically. So I don't think there's ever been a book that tried this feat before, but it just kind of happened naturally. And it, not unlike City of Glass, happened before people were really paying too much attention to graphic novels and comics. So the
Right?
book never really got the audience it deserved, I feel. Uh, uh, but that said, from time to time, I still hear from siblings of persons with disabilities, particularly people on the autism spectrum, siblings of those people, saying that they found it interesting and somewhat comforting to know that they're
Yeah.
not alone
Oh
uh,
yeah.
as a sibling, which I did not have growing up. I felt very isolated to have a brother with these special kinds of abilities and special needs. So in a way, I was writing the book for myself, you know,
Right.
imagining myself as someone who would purchase this book and say, "Oh, so
Well,
yeah,
and
that's how it
I
came
have
about.
to give the hat tip to your parents too, because like um I mean, I literally didn't get a formal diagnosis until this year
Mm.
because when I was young, I could speak, so I wasn't autistic.
Yep.
And by the time I was in high school, I was a smart kid, so I couldn't possibly be autistic. That sort of thing. So the fact that before there were really great language or understanding that your family found a way to value your brother and take care of your brother rather than going, oh, there's something wrong with him
Well, especially
is
given the
really,
fact that
really special.
that was the model back then, and my
Right.
parents grew up with education and privilege,
Hmm.
uh, and yet they also had a certain degree of innate sensibility and sensitivity to be able to understand that they weren't going to be the parents who institutionalized their first child. So I appreciate your acknowledgement of my parents because they were truly extraordinary people.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
and I owe them my life and my career. You know, my father was a successful Washington lawyer. He had to be because he had a family that four kids, and he really needed to make it work. So he made it work, but never did he uh, not only not insist, but never even imply that I should go and become a lawyer too. He encouraged me to be an artist and to be follow my nose. And so I don't have a very uh, uh, profitable lifestyle, but I just here I am, an old guy, and I'm getting by, but I'm doing what I love to do, which is to teach and make comics.
I know a lot of people who live quote unquote profitable lives that they never enjoy because by the time there's even a Mark Twain quote around it, that like the young have all of the energy and none of the means, and the
Right,
old have all of the means and none of the energy.
right, right, absolutely.
Um, so like I'm a firm believer in enjoy your life as you live it rather than focusing on the profits to
Yeah.
something sometime.
Well, I think all of my siblings were granted that privilege of being able to be encouraged to be individuals and recognized very vocally and by my parents, recognized for our different strengths
Right.
and literally what we brought to the table. So,
I mean, when I was reading it, I was just thinking, I had to keep reminding myself of the time frame because like
yeah,
the way that you all treated David, um, the ability that he was given to be himself was literally decades ahead of its time in terms of the way that
yeah.
most autistic people have experienced the world.
Well,
Um,
when my parents realized David was very young, we I illustrate this in the book based on the notes that my mother had taken. She gave me a file of notes that she had written the doctor's visits because they knew something was wrong with the kid. But the word autism was not coined uh, until the mid 40s or late 40s by a German doctor. And
mhm.
it did it there, this was there wasn't instant there was not instant information transference cross-continental back in the
Oh God, no.
so, the term autism didn't become really popular in the United States until the mid or late 60s. So here's a kid who's they take him to the doctor in the early 50s, and the doctor, accuses or accuses, I say rather strongly, my mother, there's something wrong with the kid. Well, you're not affectionate enough with him. You're
Right.
quote unquote a refrigerator mom.
Hmm.
Um, and that just didn't calculate for my parents at all. Um,
Right.
and so, yeah, and so it's just this they grew into that era with a kid who was on the spectrum, and also, not only autistic, but my brother David also had some uh, mental uh, disabilities as well. So his some surreal basic cognitive restrictions.
Right.
So, there was that as well. So, yeah. But
So,
I'm so happy that you brought it up, the book up, because it's so rare that I talk to anyone who's interested in hearing what I have to say,
well, I mean,
that they've read the book and they're familiar with it. It's still available.
it
It's
is.
never gotten
Britt
out
and
of
I bought
print.
it to read it.
Yeah.
So like if you ever
So
wanted to
thank
come
you.
back and talk about just that book, we'll get Britt together and like trust me, we could talk.
Thank you.
Um, but I know it's getting late for you, so I'm going to do two quick hits. First,
Okay.
when we first when we first traded emails, you brought up the comic you did at the end of the Fletcher Hanks, um, and I enjoyed that comic. Though I read it and I'm like, why did he pick this one out? Because it's a
Yeah.
tragic story.
Well,
So
so I
what?
guess we
Yeah,
have to start by filling your readers in a little bit about who Fletcher Hanks was,
of course.
and what these stories are. So, at the very beginning, the earliest days of the comic book, 1938, 1939, 1940, 41, was kind of a free-for-all. When the first issue of Action Comics came out with Superman, it started this bonanza, and overnight, comic book publishers popped up. Former pornographers with a printing press became comic book artists because they could really sell comics, and they had this desperate need to fill up these comic books to separate small children from their hard-earned dimes. And in comes this guy, Fletcher Hanks. Now, Fletcher Hanks was a one-man band. He wrote and penciled and inked and lettered all of his stories. And they are by far the weirdest, most twisted,
Yes.
surreal superhero comics ever, and they also are gorgeous.
Yeah.
Um, and they're filled with this sort of righteous retribution and the flaming sword of vengeance, and as well as sort of people being eaten and mutilated and grotesque deformities, and they're just bizarre comics. Um, so I first came across these comics of Fletcher Hanks when I was working at Raw with Art and Francoise, and the cartoonist Jerry Moriarty, uh, fantastic cartoonist, came in with he collected old comics, and he was like, hey, you guys know about this? And we're like, oh, it's a Golden Age comic. Between me and Art, we knew everything about Golden Age comics. You couldn't surprise us. And he's like, no, 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 take a look at this. And our eyes kind of like dropped out of their sockets and landed and bounced on the floor and down the stairs, because we had never seen Golden Age comics that were just so bizarre. Robert Crumb said Fletcher Hanks was a twisted dude. Uh, for Robert Crumb to say that,
Yeah.
you don't have to go too
I
much
mean,
further.
that's essentially Robert Crumb saying he was my brother.
Yeah, basically, exactly. So, uh, just to speed up the story, so I ended up getting interested in finding more Fletcher Hanks stories. And at a certain point, this is the earliest days of the internet, and I was trolling around and I found a reference to Fletcher Hanks. I was like, oh, wait a second. There's some reference to this guy. All I knew was that he worked under 3 or 4 different aliases for 4 years at the earliest days of the comic, basically 3 years, 1939, 1940, 1941. And then he did 53 stories completely in those 3 years and then disappeared. And so when I saw at the bottom of something about World War II pilots, some fan page on the internet, and there at the bottom was, if you can contact Fletcher Hanks, here's Captain Hanks's address. I'm thinking, Captain Hanks, oh, oh, this is why he quit making comics. He went to be a World War II pilot. Makes sense. His comics ended in 41. He went to war. Okay. So I typed this message, Dear Captain Hanks, if you are the same Fletcher Hanks that was the cartoonist making the superhero comics, I'd love to talk to you some more about your work. And almost immediately, I got back a letter, and it said, my name is Fletcher Hanks, but I think that maybe the guy you're interested in was my father, who was also named Fletcher Hanks. But maybe not. I don't know, because he left home when I was 10, having beaten my mother and stealing my savings. And the last line of his letter literally was, there may have been 2 Fletcher Hanks who were cartoonists, but only one son of a bitch like my old man. So I went to meet this guy who is now in his 70s. And it turns out he was the son of the cartoonist Fletcher Hanks. And when he told me his father's story, these bizarre, twisted superhero comics got much better. They became much more personal. And when he was this horrible man, and he was acting out his revenge fantasies on mankind in his comics. So the story that I do at the end of the collected, all of the Fletcher Hanks comics, I was able to collect over a period of about 6 or 7 years, and they're all reprinted in the book, The Complete Fletcher Hanks. And at the back is an 18, 20-page story, I can't remember, that I wrote and drew that is tells the story that I just told you,
Right.
basically.
Yeah.
Um, and the reason why I underlined it in our first email is that it's way overshadowed, as it should be, by the brilliant work of Fletcher Hanks that precedes it. But I believe that if you read the works of Fletcher Hanks, these amazing superhero comics, and really, if you're into superhero comics and you have not read Fletcher Hanks comics, you need to get this book and read these comics because I've read thousands of superhero. I was really into superhero comics. And then I read the Fletcher Hanks stories when I was all grown up and out of superhero comics, and they blew everything else out of the water. Everything. There's no greater superhero cartoonist than Fletcher Hanks. And so you read all these
I
stories,
don't know.
and at the back of the
We
book,
talked about a pretty good one earlier today.
well, yeah, he's good, but he ain't Fletcher Hanks. And then at the back of the book is my 18-page story about the true story behind Fletcher Hanks. And it changes your reading and understanding of all of these comic stories. And that's why I always try to bring it up, especially if people are interested in talking about Fletcher Hanks. I'm like, I worked my ass off on these 18 pages, and do me a favor and just read them, because at the
Right.
very least, they're going to change and inform your reading of work that you already think is pretty good.
Right. I didn't get through the whole Fletcher Hanks book, but I did just because of time constraints. I read a lot.
Yeah, yeah, good for
Uh,
you.
um, but I did get through the 18 pages and they were fantastic, and they actually made me want to go back and read more, and
Yeah,
I
it
go
will
back and
change.
forth on how much energy I have for superheroes to begin with, and I am not generally a Golden Age fan, just
They're mostly
because.
horrible. I
Right.
mean, for the very reason that I outlined, if
Right.
you a cartoonist became a comic book artist doing superheroes because he couldn't cut it as a daily cartoonist. That's what you
Right.
want to do. Daily cartoonists could make a living.
Right.
Superhero cartoonists,
Right.
not so much. And so they're all young guys, hack artists. You take a look at
Except when
most
they're Bob
comic books.
Kane.
Yeah,
Oh
Bob
wait,
Kane's
he wasn't actually a
terrible.
cartoonist,
Yeah, and he was
but he
just
made the living.
yeah, he figured out a way of making a living. Yeah.
I'm sorry. A friend of mine, the one that does the Pope Blotter with me, and therefore I read City of Glass with, wrote what's called the Four Color Trilogy, which is three plays about comics through the years, and the first one was called The Mark of Cain, about Bob Kane and Bill Finger. So
Yeah.
anytime people talk about nobody making money making comics back then, I go, well, Bob Kane figured out how. He didn't actually really make many comics, but he figured out how to make the money.
Yeah, yeah. There's a few guys like Eisner. Eisner also made a lot of dough.
Yeah, but he
He
actually made some comics.
he also made some comics. Yeah, but he was, make no mistake
He
about
was
it.
savvy.
He's
Yeah.
first and foremost. Will Eisner was a capitalist and a
Yes.
very savvy businessman.
Yes.
And secondly, he was also a cartoonist.
Right. Whereas Kane, when he was asked to draw Batman,
Couldn't really.
had
He
had
could do one.
trouble.
He could draw one Batman.
Right. So my final question, my required final question, tell me something you love. preferably comic, but we don't really have rules here. Preferably storytelling, but again, no rules. Um, that you love that not enough people around you have experienced, and you'd like them to, so you have more people to talk about it with.
Hmm. Well, I think I'd like to sort of turn that question on its head a little bit, if you don't
Sure.
mind. Um,
Like I
because my,
said, no rules.
yeah, okay, good. Okay. Um, you know, because I could just sort of name drop comics that I like and love, and I don't know how useful that would be to my taste change, and they're uh, a little esoteric. But I think I'm if you can tell that I'm treading water here because I'm just thinking about what I really want to say, which is this, I think. Um, I mentioned earlier that there would be no City of Glass if I hadn't read the work of Harvey Kurtzman. As I mentioned, also Harvey was a teacher of mine, as was Eisner and Spiegelman. But Harvey was a teacher of mine, and I mean, really sweet guy, but n not a great teacher. And he was teaching something that he shouldn't have been teaching, which was gag cartooning, and he's a sequential genius. Um, but the point that I want to make here is that when I discovered the work of Kurtzman, uh, I I loved it. Uh, he's the creator of Mad Comics that eventually
Yep.
became Mad Magazine that I grew up
Yep.
with. But before there was Mad Magazine, there were Mad Comics that he wrote
Hmm.
and laid out, and different artists would
Yep.
do the final artwork. And he also wrote the greatest war comics of all time. Uh, if I was to make a collection of the top 10 comics stories that I've ever read, multi-page stories, Kurtzman would probably have two slots in the top 10. Uh, and my point being that I learned how to make comics by studying something that I love and really reading it. It's a little bit of the lesson that we play in How to Read Nancy, which is if you deconstruct something that you love by reading it and then deep reading it and then slow reading it and then deep reading it and slow reading it together, there, there are going to be secrets that will become revealed to you that will deepen whether you become a cartoonist or not, just as a consumer of comics,
Right.
they will deepen your appreciation for not only that comic and that cartoonist, but the medium. And you will start to see things that other people are doing in reaction to it. So, for instance, if someone reads City of Glass and goes back and reads some of Kurtzman's war stories, you will see exactly where I got stole, bald-faced stole some ideas that Kurtzman laid out in there. So I guess my recommendation is really find something that you love, easy to do, right? And read it as slowly as possible. Turn off your cell phone, close your laptop, and just read this comic very slowly and pay attention to the things that you find interesting and question them. Why do you find them interesting? What is interesting to you about it? Is it the characters, the lighting, the writing? Is there something about the writing? How about the layout of the panel, layout of the page? How does it start? What questions arise at the end of page one? How are they answered or deepened in page two? Does the end happen in a way that you expected it or an unexpected ending? How is the writer and the artist working together? Is the writer the art? All of these questions.
Right.
And as you peel away the layers and deepen your understanding, your appreciation for comics will increase. So find something you
Absolutely.
love and read it slowly and deeply. That's my recommendation.
I love that recommendation. The only thing I'll add just because it's one of the things I do and it's not for everybody. But
Mhm.
when I find that comic that I love that I'm rereading and slowing it down and looking at different things, one of my reads is often on my phone, panel by
Mhm.
panel, to
Mhm.
force me to look at the panels
Mhm.
individually.
Cool. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah,
that's a great thing to do. But then
yeah.
you need to also then step back and look
Oh,
at the way
absolutely.
it's constructed, because the cartoonist is drawing the panels individually,
Mhm.
but they're part of a unit that is a page, and that page is
Right.
part of the unit that's a story.
No, even when I'm reading on my phone, I have it set up to go from full page to panel to panel to panel back to full page before going to the next page.
Cool.
But also, never my first read is on the phone. That's the like
Yep.
17th time I read Saga. I went through panel by panel, and that's when I started noticing things like, oh, anytime there's violence, the panels are crooked.
Yep.
Sometimes the panels have their corners cut, and I haven't figured out why yet.
Oh,
But I'm
there's a reason.
certain that there's a reason because
There's a reason. Look at the first time.
it's not random enough.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
random enough not to be.
Very
So
good.
Paul, this has been a pleasure.
Yeah,
I
good.
hope that you'll return. Because God, I feel like I could talk all sorts of comics with you. And like if we get the Nancy thing together,
Sure.
Dennis is gonna want to talk Kurtzman with you too, because
Mhm.
that's we actually just did Kurtzman on the Pulp Blotter. We
Good.
did Corpse on the Imjin, the Fantagraphics collection of his war stories,
Mhm.
like literally 2 weeks ago.
Oh, that's
S-
great. Yeah, that
Yeah,
one story is just about his masterpiece.
yeah,
There's a couple, but
yeah,
that's a great story. Good.
yeah.
Well, it's nice to talk to you and nice
I'm
to meet you. Thanks for having me on.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
so for 22 panels, this has been Paul Karasik, and we will see you after the next page.
Hey guys, this is Tyler from 22 Panels. I'm here to tell you all about our Patreon. If you enjoy this show, please consider donating to our Patreon to keep this show going. We have many different tiers, all different levels to help you decide what's right for you. Okay, so get on out there to patreon.com/22 Panels Podcast.